Hello everyone, it's Refresh, and I am here to report on my Guilds of Ravnica pre-release that I attended this past weekend, Saturday, September 29th. And this is a pre-release that's different from many pre-releases of the past couple years because with Guilds of Ravnica, we actually had a change to the format. It's a minor change, but one that actually did have an impact on the types of decks that you would see and you would play. The first and most notable thing about these pre-release packs is that each pre-release pack is themed to a specific guild. And so in this case, I have the Dimir pre-release pack, which says Secret, Shadows, and Silence on the back. And you'll notice that it is in the colors and the artwork is very reflective of the guild. And that is because in these pre-release packs, instead of the regular 6 full packs of the set that you would normally get for a sealed deck, you're going to get 5 regular packs and then 1 special pack. And that special pack is like the other packs, except that every single card in that pack has something to do with the guild. And so all the cards would be in their correct color for that guild, although the rarities would remain the same. On top of that, instead of getting an extra totally random rare or mythic from the set, the guild pack contains a promo rare instead of the normal rare that would be in an average pack. And so there's one less rare or mythic in these pre-release packs than are in other pre-release packs, at least for the last couple years. But that doesn't really make this a bad product per se. Even losing one rare, I think the boost that this alteration gives to the theming of the pre-release really helps. So when you go and you choose to pick up a Dimir pre-release pack, you're going to have very high odds of being able to make a Dimir specific deck, a black and blue deck. Now you might splash here and there because you open up some bombs in other colors or good removal in other colors or whatever, but there is a good chance that your base colors are going to be in the colors of the pack that you picked. So what else do you get in here? Well, you get your spin down counter, and it's going to be matched to your pre-release pack of choice. So I got a Dimir spin down counter, but if you had picked up a Boros pack, you get a Boros spin down counter, and so on and so forth. You get 5 packs of Guilds of Ravnica and 1 guild pack that's specific to your guild. And I'll show you the card that is the promo that came with mine, which is a promo mission briefing, and as you can see, the text is right there showing you that it is a pre-release promo specifically. You get a card divider, you get a thematic sheet that tells you a little bit about your guild and then gives you some instructions on how to build a pre-release deck. You'll also get 1 token that I believe is a product of one of the cards of your guild. And this token contains a code on the back right here. I'm hiding it because I'm going to be using it. But it actually lets you unlock a sealed event entry in Magic the Gathering Arena. And so there is extra value added to these packs because you actually get a digital product with this pack, and that's a nice addition to what was normally in a pre-release. And so that's another bonus that you get for going to pre-release, and I really appreciate that because it means that when you play paper Magic, you're going to get some product in digital Magic. So it'll help paper players play a bit more in the digital format as well. At least in Arena, not in MTGO, obviously. So this is everything I opened in my 6 packs, including my guild pack. And there's a few things that I'd like to note. First of all, every pack came with a token, and every pack, instead of a basic land, contained a guild gate. And so you get a minimum of 6 guild gates and 6 tokens. And that's a really nice upgrade from the past where you may not get enough tokens. At least now you can trade the tokens that you get for the tokens that you need. And having guild gates in each pack really helps increase the chance that you can play 2 or even 3 or 4 colors in this set, which I think is going to be a thing in Limited. Now what I got in terms of my rares is a Mission Briefing, I got Midnight Reapers, Bounty of Might, Thief of Sanity, Etrata the Silencer, and Bounty Agent. And those were all the rares that I got. As you can see, there is a lot in Dimir's colors, and that is again due to the fact that there was a guild pack that focused on Dimir. But there were also some good red cards in terms of removal. I had Command the Storm, Lava Coil, and Direct Current. All of those were making me consider, well, maybe not Direct Current, but Command the Storm and Lava Coil were making me consider splashing red. But in the end, the 3 Artful Takedowns that I had really made me think that I didn't need to muddy up my deck with any other colors and that I would be fine just playing pure Dimir, and so that's what I decided I would build. If you'd like to see the full card list of the cards that I opened, you can go to my Innate Games page where I'm going to have a review of this pre-release up, and that will have the full card list. So this is the deck that I built with all of those cards, and as you can see, it is sort of centered here in the 3 and 4 drop space, as is pretty typical for a sealed deck. And this particular deck has a good amount of removal. As you can see, there are 3 Artful Takedowns, Capture Sphere, as well as a Necrotic Wound. And then Mission Briefing can duplicate any of the Artful Takedowns or the Necrotic Wound as well as the Discovery and Dispersal, which is a nice tempo play, or at least draw fixing. Disinformation Campaign is nice. I do only have 4 sources of surveilling and none of it's repeatable, but being able to play this even twice is pretty good in terms of value, and so I like that. I also had enough multicolor cards that I think Rampaging Monument was quite good. Again, the fact that I only have 4 Surveil does limit the Dimir Spybug, but I found it to be still a pretty good card as long as I get to Surveil even once. And as you can see in the pool, there are some pretty strong cards, especially the Midnight Reaper, Thief of Sanity, and Atrada the Silencer. The Midnight Reaper being a good source of card advantage as my creatures die, and they inevitably will. I get to draw cards to replace them. The Thief of Sanity lets me steal cards from my opponent's deck, and Atrada is basically a removal on a stick that can come back and possibly win me the game. In addition to that, I have Whisper Agent, which is almost like removal because it can show up and block a X3 or less and kill it. And then we have means of winning the game. And so my means of winning the game are my Bats, Crawl Swarm, Watcher in the Mist, and Rampaging Monument, and as well as Veiled Shade is a sort of finisher as well. So my goal is to try to hold down the ground, and I have 2 Hired Poisoners to help with that, and then get in for the win either with my Flyers or my big creatures in Rampaging Monument and Veiled Shade. And then, I had tons of removal to help with that in tempo, and I was actually quite impressed with how this deck performed. And then it was time to take the Guild Dimir up against the other decks and see how we would do. The very first match I played against a Selesnya deck. In the first game, he didn't really have much of a chance. He didn't get a very good start, and I kind of just removed all his creatures as the game went along, and then I built a board and he didn't, and my board just kept getting bigger. One particularly bad attack caused him to lose most of his creatures in the exchange, and that let me get in for the win. The second game started off a little bit more even, but I eventually managed to outvalue my opponent, especially with some removal spells well timed, and I got in for the win. My second match was against an Izzet player, and in the very first match, we stayed even for a little bit, but eventually I managed to play better creatures and more of them and remove most of his threats, and that got me in for the win. Although there was a bit of stalling that my opponent managed to do by playing a blue creature that created 1/1 bird illusions with every instant and sorcery, and that did give my opponent a little bit more breathing room, but eventually I managed to remove it and then get through for the win. In the second game, the game was incredibly close. We went all the way to 3 and 2 life, and I had the game on lock, except my opponent top decked a Sure Strike, and that was all that my opponent needed to get in for the win. And so my opponent won the second game, and that's on top of a mill to 6, so I was quite impressed with my opponent. The third game was very much like the first game in that we started off fairly evenly, but eventually my well-timed removal sort of broke down my opponent, and I also got a massive card advantage by using my Thief of Sanity to steal a bunch of his cards and then use them against my opponent. And so the amount of cards I was able to draw off my Thief of Sanity combined with well-timed removal gave me the win, and that put me up 2-0. My third match was also against an Izzet player, and this was probably one of the scariest decks that I ran into. The first match was a straight loss for me. We stayed about even until my opponent played Niv Mizzet, and then I had no removal spells that could deal with him, and every time I would cast a spell, he just would get bigger, and so he was just slowly destroying each of my little creatures and then just swinging in with a massive beatdown for the win. And so there was little left for me to do. I lost that one handily, and that's despite my opponent mulliganing to 6. In the second match, my opponent had one of the best turns ever, taking 2 of these little red elemental creatures that pumped when you cast a instant or sorcery, and then chaining a couple spells on top of that, alongside a Beam Splitter Mage, and then when my opponent attacked, he hit me for 13 in a single turn. Fortunately, I was able to stabilize at 3 life, and then use removal spells to get rid of his creatures, and then outvalue him in the end for the win, especially after my Thief of Sanity gave me some card advantage by stealing his spells. And then we went to Game 3, and Game 3 I won, and that was mostly because my opponent was stuck on just having only blue mana for a while and not a lot else showing up. I just kind of took advantage and got a big lead on him, and then from there on forth, even once he started being able to play spells, he was a little bit too far behind in life to be able to do much but to chump, and so I got the win on that, and that took me to 3-0. My final opponent was a Golgari deck, and this was actually a very good deck, and my opponent declined to split the winnings, and so this was a fairly high pressure match because if I didn't win, then I would only be leading 3 packs as opposed to 15, and if we had split, we'd both get 9. And so the stakes are pretty high, but that's what my opponent wanted to do, so that's what we did. In the very first game, it was incredibly close. We were hitting each other back and forth and trading, and eventually I almost had the win on lockdown. I was playing Artful Maneuver time and time again in order to remove one of each threat that he played and tap down his biggest threat, and then I had one creature that would win the game for me. But my opponent removed it, and then that left me with no way of dealing the last 2 damage. And eventually I ran out of stalling cards, and so I couldn't play any more artful removals, and then my opponent just finished me off. And that was a really close, really tense game, and in the end it just came down to top decking. The second match had us again with a really close, really tense game with some major swings. And again, it was the fact that I had multiple artful removals locking down my opponent's board and letting me swing in for the win that got me there in the end. But I was really on the edge of my seat the entire game. The final game was a little bit more curved towards me, and part of that was because I got off to an early lead. We were trading back and forth between his rats and my 1/1 Spybug, and that little damage that we were doing started increasing as I increased the size of my Spybug. As we were playing more and more spells, we were removing each other's creatures, but I had a very strong advantage in terms of life, and so all I had to do was to keep my Spybug alive, and he just was not able to draw removal for that. And so I think if he had played just a little bit more aggressively, he might have been able to get my life down to a point where I would have been felt threatened. But in the end, I was just a little bit further ahead than him, and I got in for the win, despite the fact that he was able to build up a board of relatively small creatures, but still a decent number of creatures. And so with that, I won 4-0, and I got to take 15 packs of Guilds of Ravnica home, and so that was really cool. What I really appreciate about the Guilds of Ravnica pre-release is that they went back to creating a special pack for each of these guilds, and so that when you get your pre-release pack themed to a specific guild, you are almost certain to be able to play as that guild. And that really made this experience extra special because it wasn't just a plain 6-pack sealed deck experience, but it was an experience where you got to represent the guild that you picked, and you got to play it, knowing that you get to play it. And the fact that all the packaging and the spin down counter is all in line with that made this experience, I think, a bit more fun, even though the pre-release pack had one less rare. Now, I do wish that there was a little bit more to it than just you get to play the guild of your choice. But if every guild were on some sort of scoreboard, and the guild that gets the highest score gets an extra promo card or something like that. That would make it a lot more fun. But even so, I really enjoyed my experience with the Guilds of Ravnica pre-release pack, and I'm really glad that they saw this opportunity to let you play as the guild that you chose, as opposed to just, a generic 6-pack pre-release. Now, there are plenty of sets that would be fine with, and Dominaria, for example, is such a set. But with certain sets where themes are a lot more prevalent, such as Guilds of Ravnica's 2-color theme, as well as other sets like Ixalan, where you could play as one of 4 different civilizations or 4 different factions, I think it would have been more interesting then to be able to say, hey, I want to play as Merfolk during pre-release and see what that's like, rather than just getting 6 packs and just seeing where the packs would take you instead. So Guilds of Ravnica, I think, is a really good pre-release. It's so much more fun than the last several pre-releases, and this leaves me looking forward to the next pre-release set on Ravnica. Let me know how your pre-releases went in the comments down below, or what you thought of any of the games or the deck that I built or anything like that. If you enjoyed this video, hit like. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. And this was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.